Hello, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I'm Alchemist Xavier, and today's first episode in an ongoing Universal Truth series is centered on mysterious ancient civilizations. From ancient Atlantis and ancient Lemuria to ancient Kemet, also known as ancient Egypt today, I will even cover information on the sunken mysterious continent of ancient Mu, which was rumored to be under a large portion of the Pacific Ocean. Now, before I begin, I want to take the time to thank everyone for checking out this very first official episode on my channel of knowledge. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to stay updated on my latest content. Now, sit back and get relaxed so we can begin our journey into the past, starting with our first topic, ancient Atlantis. Ancient Atlantis is a name I'm sure most are very familiar with, as we have seen many forms of pop culture, media, fantasy novels, and movies make reference to the long-gone civilization that was once known to be in the Atlantic Ocean. The ancient land of Atlantis has many theories surrounding it and what it must have been like. The philosopher Plato of ancient Greece popularized the existence of Atlantis through his two written works titled Timaeus and Critias in 360 BC. In this written dialogue, Plato describes how 9,000 years before his time, ancient Egyptians passed on knowledge that mentioned a large island civilization in what is known as the Atlantic Ocean, and how this civilization ruled over areas of Africa and Europe. This is the only well-known information on Atlantis that has been allowed to be studied, glamorized, or misunderstood by the general human population. So much so that anything revealing a deeper look into who or what Atlanteans were is labeled as a conspiracy theory by those who are closed-minded or ignorant. This focus on misinformation by the leaders of society is an intentional one, but more on that in a future episode. Now, ancient Atlantis and deeper information about it does exist, even more than what Plato described. Remember I mentioned that Plato got his knowledge from ancient Egypt regarding Atlantis? Well, there's more to what even Plato knew. According to ancient Egyptian historical truths, ancient Egypt, before it was called Egypt, was called Kemet. Ancient Kemet was known to be a colony of ancient Atlantis. Before Atlantis sank beneath the Atlantic Ocean, escaping survivors left for Kemet before the destruction of Atlantis began. According to one spiritual origin story, Atlantis and Lemuria, the other mysterious ancient civilization that I will cover later in this episode, were both a part of a divine experiment. Lemuria representing what is called the divine feminine, and Atlantis represented what is called the divine masculine, the other aspect of the divine feminine. Around 70,000 BC, these two advanced civilizations thrived until Lemuria was destroyed by Atlantis around 30,000 BC. Eventually, Atlantis destroyed itself in a civil war that took place approximately 25,000 BC, 5,000 years after the destruction of Lemuria. Now, you may be wondering why these two ancient civilizations perished. Well, according to the same origin story, Atlantis and Lemuria were both very advanced in their own ways. Atlantis had a focus on advancements in the technology field, while Lemuria had advancements focused on spiritual matters. Both civilizations were also in contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, which helped Atlantis and Lemuria prosper even more. Atlantis, however, at one point in time, was infiltrated by dominating negative forces on a governmental level, which is how Atlantis eventually destroyed Lemuria and then itself. Now that we have explored Atlantis, let us continue our journey into the past, focusing on our next mysterious civilization, Lemuria. Lemuria is not as widely known of in mainstream media compared to Atlantis. However, information from the scientific community does exist on Lemuria. The main source of information brought forth from the scientific point of view comes from a zoologist and biogeographer, Philip Sclater, from 1864. Philip hypothesized the existence of a submerged land connection between India, Madagascar, and continental Africa. He once stated, "The anomalies of the mammal fauna of Madagascar can best be explained by supposing that a large continent occupied parts of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans, that this continent was broken up into islands of which some have become amalgamated with Africa, some with what is now Asia, and that in the Madagascar and the Mascarene Islands we have existing relics of this great continent, for which I should propose the name Lemuria." Sclater's theory gained some acceptance during his time within the scientific community, inspiring others to develop theories on their own. But eventually, the theory of the existence of Lemuria faded out of the larger scientific community as more theories surrounding continental drift began to surface. Unfortunately, the scientific community, while great in its own way, only accepts and studies a small aspect of our grand reality. So when it comes to information surrounding Lemuria, a seeker of this knowledge will find little on this lost continent within the scientific community. However, within ancient Indian, Sanskrit, and Tamil knowledge, Lemuria, or as it is known in Tamil mythology, Kumari Kandam, is more than just a theory like the scientific community considers it to be, but an actual place where humanity is said to originate. According to Tamil historical revivalist, Lemuria did exist, connecting the theory brought forth by the scientific community with the Pandian legends of southern India. One legend states that an ancient land was lost to the ocean, as described in the ancient Tamil and Sanskrit literature. An ancient land of an advanced civilization that was once known as an isolated landmass in the Indian Ocean, the cradle of human civilization. Kumari Kandam, or Lemuria, existed around 50,000 BC to its destruction around 16,000 BC, according to Tamil historical revivalist in our present era. This information closely ties into what I previously mentioned regarding Lemuria and Atlantis. As previously stated, from one spiritual origin story brought forth through meditation and channeling, Lemuria and Atlantis went to war with one another, resulting in the destruction of Lemuria, a highly advanced spiritual civilization around 30,000 BC. Atlantis civilization, once peaceful like Lemuria, was overtaken by a corrupt leadership, which resulted in its warlike state and eventual self-demise. Survivors of the sunken Atlantean continent settled in what is now known as Egypt, or ancient Kemet. This information lines up in similarity with the legend of Kumari Kandam from Tamil mythology. Survivors of Lemuria are mentioned to have settled in areas in India, Africa, and even as far as South America, as well as the Easter and Hawaiian Islands. According to Hawaiian culture, for example, one point in time, the islands of Hawaii were a part of a larger continent named Mu. Now, before we move on to the final mysterious civilization that we will cover today, I must close out the chapter of Lemuria, or Kumari Kandam. One thing I want everyone to pay attention to is that from the sources of information provided, one thing is very certain, that these sources of information have a lot in common with one another, and that is like saying that they are pieces of a grand puzzle, a puzzle that we will all understand one day. Now, with that pretty much being said, it's time to move on to our final civilization, the ancient continent of Mu. The ancient continent of Mu, sometimes mistaken as Lemuria, was known to be in the Pacific Ocean, a grand continent mentioned by many cultures around the world. Most notably are the Hawaiian, Polynesian, Mayan, and Hindu cultures. They all make references to Mu through their own forms of knowledge keeping. Mu itself is not Kumari Kandam, so that means that within our planet itself, there are mysteries surrounding three mysterious ancient civilizations that were lost to the ocean. In the Western world, just like with Atlantis, there were those who came across ancient information on the continent of Mu. Most notably are British American antiquarians Augustus Le Plongeon and James Churchward of the mid-19th century. Augustus and James both shared their knowledge with one another, despite being dismissed by the larger scientific community. Starting with Augustus, he was known to be one of the first in the Western world to submit his research and findings on the ancient continent of Mu after his investigations of the Maya ruins in the Yucatan. He claimed that he was able to translate the Popol Vuh from Spanish to English. The Popol Vuh was a series of texts recounting the mythology and history of the Quiche people of the ancient Maya civilization. In 1701, Francisco Ximenes, a Spaniard Catholic priest, was given the opportunity to learn from the Quiche people during European exploration. He was taught the Quiche language, Cachiquel. Francisco was then introduced to the book of the Quiche people, the Popol Vuh, which he then translated from Cachiquel to Spanish. When antiquarian Augustus eventually explored the area a few centuries later, he too was introduced to the sacred text that was already translated prior. According to the translations by Augustus of the Popol Vuh, he claimed that the civilization of Yucatan was older than those of Greece and Egypt, and even told the story of an even older continent. Augustus also compared similarities of Mu with Atlantis, even claiming that Egypt was founded by a queen of the fallen continent Atlantis. This hypothesis from Augustus lines up perfectly with what I mentioned earlier regarding ancient Egypt. Earlier I mentioned that Egypt was once known as Kemet, and Kemet was a colony of ancient Atlantis, as Atlantis sank beneath the waves conveyed from many stories of ancient cultures. There is a similarity with these sources of information, and it shows that there is truth to these accounts of the ancient world. Refugees from the old continent of Mu are also said to have fled to Central America, Augustus also claimed in his writings. Now, when it comes to our next antiquarian of the Western world, we have a man who spent much of his time researching and exploring knowledge on the lost continent of Mu, and that is James Churchward of the mid-1800s. He is known for his series of books like The Lost Continent of Mu, written in 1926, The Children of Mu, written in 1931, and finally, The Sacred Symbols of Mu, written in 1933. Churchward claimed that while he was a soldier in India, he befriended a high-ranking temple priest who showed him a set of ancient, sunburnt clay tablets that had recorded text in a long-lost Naga Maya language, which only a few in India could read and understand. James Churchward was able to convince the high-ranking Hindu priest to teach him the dead language and decipher the tablets by promising to restore and store the clay tablets, for Churchward was an expert in preserving ancient artifacts. After spending time learning the lost language, Churchward was able to master most of it. He was able to convey that the origin of man was the continent of Mu, and through his first book, written in 1926, he mentions his findings along with the clay tablets of India also included 2,500 stone tablets that had been uncovered by archaeologist William Niven in Mexico, thousands of miles from India. According to the tablets found in India and Central America, the creation of Earth started with Mu as the first place of humanity. There thrived the people known as the Nakal, an advanced civilization of people that flourished 50,000 to 12,000 years ago. Mu had a population of around 64 million inhabitants, 7 major cities of advanced spiritual technology, and several colonies on other continents. The 64 million people living on the continent were separated as 10 tribes that followed one government and one spirituality. The tablets also state that Mu itself was located in the Pacific Ocean, stretching east to west from the Marianas to Easter Island and from north to south, including Hawaii and Mangaya. A land mass that was 5,000 miles across from east to west and 3,000 miles from north to south, larger than South America. Mu was known as the common origin of great civilizations like Egypt, Greece, Central America, India, and others. Mu was led by a king named Ra, according to the tablets, and Ra has been seen in various other cultures as well, most notably ancient Egyptian culture. Ra is known as the sun god. The tablets also had mentioned a man who many know of as Moses. Moses was trained by the Nakal Brotherhood in Egypt. Yes, Moses of the Holy Bible. Also, the Garden of Eden mentioned in the Bible was also located on Mu in its beginnings. James Churchward conveyed much of the information contained in the tablets that he studied. Churchward even mentioned and made a reference to the Ramayana epic, a religious text of Hinduism attributed to the sage and historian Valmiki of 500 BCE India. James states that Valmiki mentions how the Nakals, the people of Mu, came to Burma, modern-day Myanmar. Finally, James Churchward attributed all megalithic art in Polynesia to the people of Mu. The symbols of the sun are found on stones in various Polynesian ruins, such as the stone hats called pukao on top of the giant moai statues. These moai statues still baffle and mystify the scientific community today, so there's hardly much to understand in regards to what information they may have. However, continuing with what was researched by James Churchward, many forms of Polynesian, even Maori architecture from New Zealand showcase remnants of the long-gone civilization of Mu. A lot of what has been researched in India, Central America, Burma, and Polynesia, along with various native cultures around the world, show that various ancient civilizations not only were real, they helped start history that many have tried to keep alive as the world fell to its state of greed, manipulation, and materialism, silencing or negatively labeling those that try to share this sacred wisdom. But that time is up, and it is time for humanity to learn the truth, as the truth will help us take our power back from those that continue to keep humanity in the dark. And this brings us to the end of our journey into one aspect of the past. There is still much information about our human history, and by extension, our universe, that must be revealed. With the US government preparing a report on recent UFO sightings, times are definitely shifting to realms of truth, and I will do my best to help fill in the gaps as more is revealed to humanity. In my next episode, I will discuss the topic of extraterrestrials and how their existence has impacted humanity throughout various time periods and cultures, influencing our mythologies, legends, and even society today. So, to my fellow truth seekers, thank you for taking time to watch this episode on ancient, mysterious civilizations. If you have anything you wish to share, definitely leave a comment down below and stay tuned for the next episode. Until next time, namaste.